So, in case you're wondering how to do this, this is a 1-inch MPT pipe tap, and just take your freeze plug out and tap it in. It just happens to be the right dimension. So it should bottom out about there on the thread. So I've got about another 3 threads to tap in. Obviously with a big tap like this, there's no room to get a tap wrench in. So at this point, you're stuck using crescent wrenches. You want to get as deep as you can so that you can get your fitting threaded in. So that's bottomed out right there. But there's plenty of meat in there. I've got the piping coming out of the head through a 16 AN and to the radiator inlet. You can see the water pump, the return inlet to the pump, and my electric fan sits in here about that deep. I actually installed the other outlet to the heater core. I finally got those fittings in. So I go from a 10 AN to a 12, and then 5/8 hose for the rest of it. A 12 AN hose, I should say. I designed this whole radiator hose from 2 hoses actually. Went to Summit Racing, and they actually have a filter process where you can put in the size of the hose ends on both ends of the hose, the length of the hose, and they'll give you all the hoses that match up. I use 1.5" and 34-inch length for hose, and they came up with one that had a lot of convoluted bends in it from before the Econoline, and bought it and then cut it up, and then I ended up buying 1.5" straight that was flexible, even though I don't need the flex really. A coupler that I could put a drain in, because obviously if the hose is lower than the radiator, you want to be able to drain it. So I got one of those, and after cutting up the hose, I ended up having to put in couplers for the connections, because obviously the bends weren't going to be the same. So now that I've got the heater hose done up, I'm going to put this braided nylon sheath onto it, and this stuff, I don't know if you've used it, is really nice because as you pull it, it gets tighter and tighter, but if you push it, it gets bigger in diameter. So you can fit it over the hose very easily. So where you have things like this Petcock that I need to unscrew, I can just cut a hole in it and it'll stay below it. What I could do also is put the hose clamps on the outside of this, and that would really lock it down. I think I want to leave the hose clamps underneath where they don't see them. And then for the ends, put a hose fitting in the big clamp, put it all in and cut this off to length, and then clamp this on each end so it'll have a big AN fitting nut, it looks like. These are those finishing fittings. Should make it look nice and clean. I've got the lower radiator hose in place and got the finishing fitting on there. This is the bracket I made up for the water pump, bracket for the heater core bypass. So it's coming together. The catch can hose is coming down. None of this has been put into place yet for sure, but at least it's getting there. So this would be the drain valve for the radiator and the hose. I haven't hooked up the oil accumulator solenoid yet, but it's all plumbed. You can see with that power steering pump relocated how much room is up in here. The axle will be coming across, but there's a ton of room in there now. Good clearance on everything, more than a finger width between the pipes. I've got to clean up the wiring yet. To make the oil catch can tubing, the hose I should say, I used a piece of 5/8 heater hose, just generic hose, and part of the elbows from that heater hose tubing from the PT Cruiser. 5/8 external diameter piece of tubing, or you can use a 3/8 MPT nipple, kind of like this. This is 1/8 inch, but pretty much the same thing. If you get a 3/8, you can use that, or you can just get a piece of tubing. So you put that inside the hose, put your elbow onto it, and then if you have any extra elbows, you just add them along the hose as you need them. What you want to do to seal this hose up and make it a solid joint, 1-inch heat shrink tubing. This is tight enough, I'll have to slide it from the other end. So you're taking 1-inch heat shrink tubing. So I knocked everything off the workbench. So as you can see, that's on there tight enough that you can see the indentations of the hose underneath. So that's a solid fit. You got 3/8 fitting inside, nipple, and then you got the heat shrink over it. And then around that you can put a 12 AN finish fitting. And then actually what I need to do too is 3/4 inch braiding. So you slide this on the hose. I'm going to use a longer piece obviously when I do it for real. When you pull it tight, you're going to get a little bit of excess where there's a bend. You need to get it inside. This is a 12 AN finishing fitting for a 5/8 hose. But you're going to want to get the nylon sheath inside the fitting, and then you got your hose clamp. So when you finish this up, it'll make it solid. This is a roll of 3/4 inch braided sleeving. I think I paid $19 for it for 50 feet or 100 feet. I can't remember how much I bought. But if you're looking to do 5/8 hoses, 3/4 inch will just work. 3/4 inch hoses, obviously you'll have to do 1 inch. I changed my mind on the oil catch can. This type is made more for V8s to just catch the fumes blowing out of the valve covers. It didn't really fit well where I wanted it. Nice product though. So I'm switching over to a different catch can. This one, you get the catch can, but it's made more for a suction type. So in this you can have a V8 or a straight, whatever you want to use. This type has 2 ports that are sucking in, and then one that's going out to the intake. So as you start driving the car, you're sucking clean air into your intake because it's going through, it's being filtered first by this baffle and also by this brass centered valve, which is going to keep everything into the can. So when you're driving it, there's always a suction on the input side of the turbo. It'll be behind the air cleaner. So you put the valve in. So on your air cleaner, you'll have a nipple somewhere that this line will run to the center valve in this catch can, and that'll draw the air in. So whatever's coming out of your valve covers won't just be pressurized from the engine, it'll actually be under a vacuum, so it's going to pull any moisture or anything it can get out of the engine, and it does that through these nipples. I'm going to change the fitting obviously, but you get all this in the kit. And the one thing the kit does not come with, which I was surprised, is a Petcock for the drain. It comes with a pipe plug that you can put in, and then it even includes the wrench with it. So you can, if you want to drain this, you can just take the pipe plug out. But I'm going to use a Petcock. This is a 1/4 inch MPT. The hole is a 3/8 MPT, so you're either going to have to get a bushing to neck it down, or get a 3/8 MPT Petcock. They give you a plug, so you can always take the plug out. They even give you the wrench for the plug. I was kind of surprised at that. But they don't give you a Petcock. Petcock's a lot easier, 1/4 MPT. So I just bought this one from Dorman, and the part number on this is 61104. And I say that because they make another Petcock that's similar that has an extension on the end. It's a piece of crap. So this is the one to get, 61104, and you can, I've actually used that on my radiator hose, lower radiator hose, so that it drains properly. So a little smaller product, less than half the size of the other one, and I think this one's the better way to go. This is the old tank that I had made. I actually bought this part of the tank, but it had an input and an output and a baffle inside that kind of did the same thing. The only thing is, this is way heavier than this one is. As far as fitting under the fender though, it went in the same spot up under the left front fender, and worked well. I mean, I would get over an inch of water out of it every month, and I wasn't driving the car a whole lot, so this just shows how much moisture was coming out of the engine. A little bit of oil, but mostly just moisture. So I can highly recommend putting these catch cans in, because that moisture is going to go somewhere. And I'd rather have it go in a catch can than be running around inside my motor. So going back to the oil catch line, the vent hose, I've got it coming down, ran it across the transmission. It's actually over the wiring that goes to the starter. And then it goes down underneath. So lighting's not the best in here, but the input to the catch can will be a 90. See if I can move this a little better. And then I've got my breather hose that's coming down from the valve cover. So that'll go up in. Now this is a 5/8 hose. Again, in AN terminology, that's a 10 AN. So I've got a 10 AN push on going into the hose, and because it's not pressurized, I don't have any problem using this. I'm sure pressure would even work in it, but I'm doing it with the 12 ANs for all the pressure stuff. So that'll be the input, and then I'll have the output going to the intake piping that'll come out of this smaller fitting. So I've got the can here. If I need to drain it, open that up, put something under it to catch the oily water,